So you always have your abundance in food for yourself. That was a store of value because you did it. You had proof of work of that food. And you didn't have to
Mhm.
worry about anything else. And you had a decentralized way of doing it. So you start thinking about food and money in the same way as far as that decentralization, scarcity, proof of work. Bitcoin ethos is the same as what I'm doing within the Beef Initiative and food intelligence. They're the same thing. And you look at the devaluation of our dollar from going off the gold standard, and then basically the health of a nation by consuming this new consumption model that was, basically designed by chemical companies. You see there's a solution and you see the problem, and it's clear as day. Once you see it, you see it. Just like, Bitcoiners, once they see it, you see it. So
What's up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of Changing the Tide. Today, I have Texas Slim in the studio, the virtual studio, to talk about the Beef Initiative, the history of the American cattle rancher, the history of food. WTF happened in 1971 does not just apply to money, but also to food, so we get into that. And really just dive into the wealth of knowledge that he has gained over the past year. I mean, he grew up the grandson of a rancher, and so he's got that in his blood and knows a lot. He's got a tech background too, because his career path took him in that direction, and now he's bringing it together and synthesizing it, helping support the American rancher, and in that way, helping to support our food supply, the health of people that comes from the health of soil, and animals play a huge role in that, and they have for thousands of years. So we dive into that. I'm excited to get going, and let's talk to Slim. I love it.
yeah,
I love it. I was like, I need to hit record because we're already
right.
we're
Might
already
as
into
well,
it.
man. That's it. We always do that in podcasting, don't we?
Yeah,
It's like, oh shit, I need to start this because we're getting some good, feedback here. So,
for sure. Well, hey, Slim, welcome to the show.
hey, thanks for having me. Thanks for being versatile and everything. As far as my schedule, it's been a little crazy, but here we are, and that's a good thing. So,
It is. I mean, it's like apropos right now, man. What's going on over there in the Netherlands?
hmm
And we got those Dutch farmers now going into Germany, and
yeah.
German farmers are getting fired up. So,
Well,
have you
it
been
needs to
following that?
happen. Yeah, I have, and the thing about it is, which I find it's humbling, and everything that's happening. I was looking at the calendar the other day. This time last year, I was on a harvest. Up in North Dakota, from Texas all the way to North Dakota, and all the way back. So I saw stuff coming down the pipe then, and that's when I said I got to write the Harvest of Deception. And I keep on signaling out some of the old writings that I've done and saying, hey, this is how it's being, and here it is, it's happening. So, like I said, it's not bragging rights or anything like that, but yeah, this is happening. People don't understand, the power behind it, the intentionality, the type of money that's been invested to basically I call it a global industrial food shift is what's going on here. And people really, it's daunting to look at, and it's daunting to understand. And, just going into that Substack, you kind of catch up pretty fast, I think.
Yeah, yeah, you really do. I mean, I started following that, and then, like I was saying offline, picked up a Prime box, my wife and I,
Yeah.
and said, "Hey, let's try out this beef box."
hmm
And never had had a never had had a Denver steak, a chuck eye steak, and then we had them, and it was like, oh man, like, chuck eye, some call it the poor man's ribeye, but goodness gracious, is that tasty?
it is. And, you bring up something I have to remind people. It's like, okay, what's your perspective? What has your been experience from the past? And that I always kind of point out that this is kind of how detached we are from quality of food. Is that, you can just, let's look at the chuck eye. I mean, you look at that, the poor man ribeye. Well, that chuck eye can be just as good as a ribeye from the grocery store, and it can be third of the cost. And that, once again, that's how detached we are from value, from price models, from market access to quality to how things are really supposed to taste. You can't compare. And once you once you go down that rabbit hole of beef, you don't go back. And if you tell people you'll go into that box, and then you're going to go into a quarter of a cow, then you're going to go into a half a cow. And once you get to that half a cow, you're going to, have to get that freezer. And then finally it comes. You're waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're opening up the door to the freezer, and it's full of a half a cow, and you're like, I mean, this is the best day of my life. It's like my food is here, my family is secure. I don't have to worry about this food insecurity that the rest of the countries or in the world exactly is about to go through, because you as the individual is decentralized your market access to good protein, to good nutrition that basically a lot of people don't realize that they don't have access to, but there's answers. And that's the protocol that we've developed within the beef initiative, in partnership with KNC Cattle Coal, and that's just going to evolve and get bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's so many ways we could go with that. What you just mentioned of decentralizing your access and getting back to market access.
Hmm.
It's really funny because my wife and I don't we barely watch any television, but for some reason we picked up Chef's Table on Netflix. And
Hmm.
there's a guy up in New York named Dan Barber who is on one of the episodes, and he's credited, and you'll laugh because but he's credited with bringing back the quote unquote farm to table movement into like fine dining.
Oh, okay.
Some people never left farm to table, right? That's just been their reality for
Hmm.
centuries. But it just made me laugh because I thought to myself, even fine dining got away from direct market access, and it required this movement,
Yeah.
you know, and so it's just very fascinating because I mean, from what I've heard from you, you know, again, farm to table is how many people just live their lives.
That's the only way I grew up. I mean, I didn't grow up any other way. I mean, of course, we had the grocery store. I grew up in a small town in Texas, and in that one small town, we had three grocery stores, and it supported three grocery stores. And
Wow.
everything came within 60 miles. The beef came from within 60 miles. We had local processing plants. We had local agricultural produce. So it was just you could function on three separate different types of grocery stores, and that's just how we were raised. If we went to the grocery store, it was just to pick up other things, because I grew up eating off of grandfather's farm and ranch in the surrounding areas. We grew up with a freezer full of beef. We grew up with plenty of vegetables. Everything else were little staples that we got. Even your eggs were local back then. Your milk was local. As a little child, it's been a long time. I grew up with milk being delivered on the front porch. That's just how it was. And so, for you bring up a good point in so many aspects of our society and our environments, that we got so far away from that. And once you start looking about, hey, where we came from and when was the detachment of all that, if you're a Bitcoiner, you look at the, 1971. Let's look at it. The advent of the supermarket, the injection of all kinds of fake commodities into our consumption models. And as we've grown, you see that as those more fake commodities, and we got further away from farm to table, our health went down, the value of the dollar went down. So they're symbiotic. You can't separate the health of the nation and the devaluing of our dollar, the devaluing of our food, has all been the same scale, the same model, and the same timeline. And for somebody to say, hey, I'm bringing back regenerative farming and ranching, I'm the claim to fame that fine dining. Yeah, some of the best nicest restaurants in the world still use vegetable oil to cook with. And you're like, really? That's how far we've come. And for them to be able to seize that, more power to them. But that's it's kind of disheartening that people like to take claim to fame, saying I'm bringing back this. No, man, this is how families been living their whole lives. I go across the United States right now, and you can find all kinds of people. They're just not going to end up on Netflix.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We need like a well, Bitcoiners are too busy building, so there can't be like a Bitcoiner flicks. But that it
One
is what
day,
it is.
right? One day, right? I think Bitcoiner
Bi-
Flicks is basically all these micro podcasts that we all get into because we want to educate, we want to inform. and we want to decentralize our communications in ways that that they can't really, they can't get us all. So it's one big movement, and I'm really glad that everybody's starting to pay attention to to food. I mean, the way I grew up is that you know freaking we grew up where you had access to the freezer. Okay, it was waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning to put some steak. My dad did this. Is the only reason I'm reflecting on it. But he would go at 3 o'clock in the morning. He was a line pole guy for many years, a master electrician, all kinds of things. And he's always hungry. He was, but he would go and cook steak in the middle of the night, and you'd smell that steak at any time during the day and night. And that's just, we had free range. We could go, and as kids, my mom used to make all these hamburger patties throughout the day. We were playing all the time outside. I mean, you always had access to pure animal protein. It's just how you were raised. You didn't have to, there was no prohibition of food, but the food was, like today, there's no prohibition of food. Everybody basically eats anything they want. But it causes a lot of ill health in our nation. Me growing up, I could have 5 hamburgers a day if I wanted it, and it was there. The meat was affordable, it was locally sourced, and it was just something that you grew up. I mean, I grew up cooking out of a cast iron skillet, and I grew up cooking cow out of the freezer. That was my childhood. And we got to eat steak. I mean, T-bones is how we were raised, but because it's Texas, because those cuts of the cow, like you're saying, people don't realize you can't have a T-bone and a New York strip. You either have New York strips or you have T-bones. And so I grew up knowing the cuts of the cow for the most part. But what I want to bring back to everybody is the access that you can create for yourself and your family. It's out there. It's a gold mine right now. And that's why we're trying to decentralize everybody's thinking about how to access food. Do it a different way, do it in a decentralized way that's more about sound money, sound health, and for a sound future for your family.
Yeah. Hashtag food intelligence, right?
Yeah, that's the one that I did that on Harvest last year, because I was on Harvest, and I was like, man, how am I going to get people to kind of pay attention? Of course, I was dabbling in Twitter, and I said, well, I got to hashtag something, and I just said, man, this is all about food intelligence, and it just people grabbed a hold of that. Now I think if you use it though, I get shadow banned sometimes when I use it, and so it's definitely in the algorithms and the AIs and all that kind of stuff. So they don't like you to have good food. I guarantee you, they don't want you to have market access to pure animal protein. They really don't. They're a powerful, global apparatus now that has had these plans to kind of prohibition, our food sources, and you're seeing that's going on, globally right now.
Yeah. Well, let's take it back because
Sure.
you talked about 1971 and how the debasement of money is closely tracking a debasement in the food supply. But can we go back even further? Because I've heard you talk about the legacy of the American rancher and how it used to be. Can
Hmm.
we just spend a few minutes on that?
Yeah, I mean, I always like to, since I'm so many generations of Texan, that I know Texas history pretty well. I grew up understanding Texas history. I understand the dirt roads, the agriculture, ranching of the state pretty deep. I love to talk about it. And I always like to start, if we're going to talk about where we came from, I always start with 1878 in Texas. That was the end. We had the Civil War that ended. Texas was part of the United States now. We had been a republic. We had battled all the way from 1845 to 1878. You had the Civil War. You had Texas as a republic, and you had now you had the ending of the Comanche Wars. Well, after, and the Mexican American War. And so you had all these conflicts that went away. Well, Texas played a part in all of it. But one thing that people don't really realize is during that time, you had thousands upon hundreds of thousands of cattle that were roaming Texas. And all of a sudden, you had this new thing that popped up, and it was called the cowboy. And the cowboy was derived and came from Texas, and the skill sets and kind of the heritage and history of the vaquero out of Mexico. So from 1880s, 1878, of course, was the pivotal year when these conflicts started. You had a lot of migration to Texas. Well, guess what? We started feeding a nation. Texas became a powerhouse across the world because at that time we had all this beef, and we started rounding them up, and we started creating the cattle drive. And so within that, you first didn't have these big ranches, but during 1880s, you look back on, Yellowstone right now, and they have a show called 1885, I believe it's called. Um, you look what they're doing. They're pioneering into Texas, and they're basically becoming ranchers. You didn't know how to be a rancher. This had never been done. It had been done a lot of different ways across the world, of course, but this was a new thing. This was new innovation. And what we found is that we were very good about feeding a nation, and we did it with the cattle drive. So it created some new heritage, it created a new tradition, and it created a lot of legacies that moved forward across the United States. And it started with the Texas cattle drive. And it started us first feeding basically military bases from Texas. We did the cattle drive all the way up, and Lonesome Dove, the movie Lonesome Dove in the book with Larry McMurtry. That's about Oliver and Goodnight, Charles Goodnight and James Oliver. One was a cattle baron in the future, but they were both Texas Rangers, and they learned that they could there was opportunity to drive these cattle to the rest of the United States. And that's where you got all the cattle drives to Kansas and Kansas City, New Mexico, Colorado, and it started feeding soldiers in these military bases. So if you look at that heritage, then all of a sudden, we started the cattle drives. Well, we started claiming land, and we started creating the vast, big, powerful Texas ranch. And you had the XIT, you had the 4 6s, you had the Matador, you had so many different ranches started popping up across Texas, especially where I'm up in the Texas Panhandle where I was raised. Within that, you had a new strength that a nation needed, and a state was able to put their mark on. And you look at the power of the cattle rancher. Well, it's about proof of work. It's about pure animal protein. It's about, obligation, accountability. Every day is something you're having to battle elements. You're having to battle manipulations. You had the cattle barons. You had people that stole cattle rustling. You had everything that you see today. It's just being done in a different way, and it's being done in a modern way, in a technology way, in a global, liberal one world order way, to where we're basically squashing all of this heritage and this tradition, and we're taking the cow out of our consumption model, and it's by design, and it's really destroying the American rancher as we know it. And a lot of people don't see it, they don't understand how it's happening. And because you get this somebody that's the rancher themselves are very humble. They're very part of the salt of the earth type of people. They have a lot of pride. And a lot of ranchers and farmers are captured, and you're seeing what's going on in the Netherlands. This is not just a United States thing. This is a global thing that is being orchestrated. And if you can take food and you can take the animal out of your consumption model, then you control the people in ways that people don't understand that they can be controlled. And I always say, you control the seed, you control the people, you control the seed, you control the world. And people have become very complacent on where food comes from. And if you're depending on a global apparatus that is trying to create a one world food group, and that's how you're going to feed yourself, well, you're going to be, this next 10 years, this decades, you're going to have a lot of rude awakenings. And how they're orchestrating this, as far as taking away the heritage, the tradition of the cattle rancher and everything, and replacing it with, climate change, and you're going to be a better citizen, and your consumption models, and you're going to get these brownie points, and you're going to have a consumption social credit score, because they know everything you eat already. They know that you think it tastes good, and you don't care that it's bad for you because it tastes good. And we've proven that in the United States. The proof of work is there. We're metabolically bankrupt, and it's because of what we've eaten the last 50 years.
Hmm. Yeah, this is what, to go back to that Netflix, that it hit me hard. Um, it's like people are rediscovering hundreds and thousands of years of understanding about how to grow food. So what he talked about was they started with cows,
Mm-hmm.
and what they realized they needed, in order to just kind of keep spreading, the cow manure, which regenerates the grasslands, is they
Mm-hmm.
needed chickens.
Yep.
So they got the chickens. Well, in order to have the chickens, they needed these guard animals, and then they realized the forest is encroaching on their little place up there in New York. So they need goats because the goats eat the bramble, and they
Yeah.
keep it from encroaching on the farmland. And it's like he's basically saying, well, in 2008, I discovered what people have known for thousands of years.
It's
Is
so true. It's so true. And everybody I talk to, a lot of ranchers, it depends on you got a Texas rancher, but then you got somebody that, is an animal producer, and they like to pride themselves as being grass farmers. And what you just explained is what they're talking about, that rotational grazing, that you can use the animal as a land tool, the land tool to rebuild the soil, by grazing the grass. And by using chickens and using hogs and using goats and using lambs and using cattle all at the same time, you're controlling insect control. You're controlling, you're getting even stronger soil. Your minerals and vitamins are actually getting more profound and stronger. And you're using that fertilizer from the livestock to fertilize the land. It's all this one beautiful little circle that just goes on and on. And it's how we got here. Like you say, thousands of years of rotational grazing and using animals as the land tools. And once you kind of go, whoa, that makes sense. Well, let's look when they stole that from us. Well, they started stealing it from us, after the World War because, we made bombs and then we went from bombs to fertilizer. Then we went from fertilizer to herbicides and pesticides, herbicides and pesticides, fertilizers, and then the genetically modified seeds. And it's just been a bull rush ever since then because that's when we started getting manipulation of the FDA, the USDA, the United States government, and they basically started capturing the American farmer and rancher. And now they've got a global plan to capture every bit of it because they want to take your food and put it into the chemical labs and put it in the petri dishes, basically. That's a broad
yeah.
statement, but that's really, if you can visualize that, take the animal out of the processing center, take the seed out of the soil, and put it in a warehouse to where they don't have to worry about any of that. Because the reason they're doing this and they're saying it's about climate change, no, it's because they destroyed the soil with all the chemicals, with the herbicides, the pesticides. We only have 40 harvests across the board in the United States left. And this is not something that, people, argue about because it's the truth. And you have 40 harvests. Well, that means 20 years. You got 2 harvests a year usually. We've destroyed our soil. And so that's
Mm.
once again, use climate change as the distraction and make you look like a great consumer if you're going to go vegan or vegetarian and eat this fake meat, the 3D printed, the stem cell meat, the plant-based protein meats that they've designed in the chemical labs, and the genetically modified seeds, from proteins to pea proteins to canola oils, which is rapeseed. Every one of these has been outlawed by the FDA at one point in time, but now they don't because they can modify it. And so if people really truly understood where we came from and where we're trying to go, they're going to say, I'm going to eliminate this type of consumption. My consumption model is going to change, and I'm going to create a whole new market access for myself and my family.
Because you can vote with your money
Yeah.
for the type of food production, and the vote has been overwhelmingly going towards away from that thousands of years true sustainability model
Mm-hmm.
where it's regenerative. It feeds back into it's this ecosystem that feeds, and the health just it goes in a circle, right?
100%.
Or you can vote for the last 50, 70, 80 years where we've been stripping the soil of nutrients.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so where do you see Bitcoin and Lightning playing into all this? And how'd you find out about it?
Yeah, and it's a good question, and it was by accident, to tell you the truth. I've been very active in my life. I mean, riding horses, breaking horses, riding dirt bikes. I've broken over 20 bones. Got like 14 pieces of metal in me. I've been hurt, right? I've done that. I've got proof of work to show. You should see my X-rays. Fascinating. But by saying
Wow.
that, a couple of years ago, I had an internal injury. I kind of got busted up, and so I was laid up for about 6 weeks, and I can't remember exactly when it was. It's about 3 years ago, but I started looking at food again because I needed to, kind of my diet needed to change because I had a portal vein that had collapsed from trauma. And so I
Mm.
needed to go low sodium, da, 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 da. And I started talking to my doctor, and they didn't know a damn thing about nutrition. And I was like, what's going on here, man? These people are paid. These people went to college, all kinds of stuff. So I said, once again, me, I said, I'm going to do my own damn research. And so I started going into research of food again. And because I had a lot of knowledge where I had grown up and how things had, my grandfather was a regenerative farmer and animal producer. So I knew how he
Mm,
did it. And I knew how he had been squeezed out of the land that he took, his whole life over 9 years to obtain. Well, one day it was just gone because of, the monocropping and everything. The land was stolen from him in ways that are being stolen to this day, especially to this day. And right when I started looking at
mm,
food and going down that rabbit hole of food again, I got into Bitcoin and I started doing it together. And I started researching Bitcoin and my type of research and analysis on food. And they became symbiotic as far as, they needed to work together. My knowledge needed to work together. And I said, okay, I'm going to go ahead and make this symbiotic. I'm going to look at money. I'm going to look at food at the same time because what I understood and what I really tagged into early on was the decentralization and the scarcity of Bitcoin. And I started putting that in the thought of food, of the decentralization on how my grandfather had very massive success for his community and his family because he was very decentralized way of thinking. He didn't have to worry about anything. He had a two-party line phone system, and so I started thinking about decentralized food from where we came from, regenerative. You knew your neighbor, you knew your community. If you had a full cow, you traded half a beef for a full hog. You had all these decentralized bartering systems, and whatever you had in excess, you took to the community and you did your farmer's market. So you always have your abundance in food for yourself. That was a store of value because you did it. You had proof of work of that food and you didn't have to
mhm,
worry about anything else and you had a decentralized way of doing it. So you start thinking about food and money in the same way as far as that decentralization, scarcity, proof of work. Bitcoin ethos is the same as what I'm doing within the beef initiative and food intelligence. They're the same thing. And you look at the devaluation of our dollar from going off the gold standard and then basically the health of a nation by consuming this new consumption model that was basically designed by chemical companies. You see there's a solution and you see the problem, and it's clear as day. Once you see it, you see it. Just like Bitcoiners, once they see it, you see it. So
yeah. Well, there's some interesting overlap here too, because they also are both, in some senses, really a global phenomenon, aren't they? Like Bitcoin,
mhm.
anyone anywhere can access the network. Well, it just so happens that over hundreds and thousands of years, I mean, you can go to Japan, you can go to Argentina and Brazil, you can go to the Alps, in Europe. You
Mhm.
got Texas and really big swaths of the South and Midwest where beef, Australia even, where beef is grown
Mhm.
and grazed and pastured, and so you do also have this kind of worldwide, in a sense, network.
Oh yeah, 100%. And I've been lucky enough. I started traveling. I've always kind of been a, kind of a gypsy cowboy type. But I've been around the world a couple of times. I've ridden a motorcycle across Asia. I've done South America, Central America, Mexico, Europe, all that kind of stuff. But what I always found out that I could always get beef anywhere I wanted to, or at least get some pretty good animal protein. And I noticed, that actually a lot of times in these other countries, especially like in Thailand, I'll use that as an example. They had the same model that my grandfather had. Everybody in Thailand, you go out to the rural Thailand, those people eat like kings every day. They don't have to worry
Wow.
about any type of centralized, and it's getting worse though, because, we're becoming this one world food group, this liberal global, one world order type crap that's going on. But you go out into
Yeah.
outside of Chiang Mai, Thailand, in the northern province out there, you get out to the jungles of there, and you've got communities out there that have never changed, and they're the healthiest people you'll ever come across. And it's for one reason: it's because they're stewarding their land and their animals, and they're using the animals as the land tools. And the beef is going to taste a little bit different. It's not going to be as fatty. It's going to be more lean. It's truly grass fed, grass finished. But what you do see across, to your point, you see this happening across the world where people say, is the beef initiative just a Texas thing? No, this is a global thing. This is a global movement. This is a global awareness. And because you can do it anywhere, and you can go anywhere, you don't need a lot of land to be self sustaining. You
Mm.
truly don't. And if you don't have an, I was in Thailand. I'd go through these, cities. Like you go Bangkok, you go down to Phuket, you go down to Trang, you go on to different cities in Thailand. These people have very small places in which they live, but most of the time they're growing their own food on their damn balcony. That's nothing more than 4 by 4. They know how to do this, and so you can't
Yeah.
say it's about this big landmass that you need. It's just not the case. It's about understanding where you can do that cycle, that circle, like you're talking about. And you can do it in a very small space. And you can do it to where the nutrients and the minerals that you need are basically trapped in that small environment. And if you know where food comes from and you know soil, then you can be very productive and powerful doing that.
Yeah, because what it sounds like is, from your grandfather's experience and what's going on in the Netherlands is,
Mm-hmm.
we need these. Well, it wasn't your grandfather's experience. What's going on now in the Netherlands is, you only have this much nitrogen you can use,
Yeah.
only this much fertilizer, ESG. And it's this weird thing of we're going to try to enforce sustainability on top of what we wrecked, but it's only going to make it worse.
Oh, yeah.
It's not a
No, this is
It's
this
like
is a nefarious.
pharmaceuticals.
Yeah, this is a nefarious movement. You have the medical, pharmaceutical, agricultural complex. And if you don't think that that thing, as far as the medical, pharmaceutical, agricultural corporations and industry are the same thing, they're the same thing. They all work together. They all, you have the Bear umbrella. Who's under Bear. I've got charts in the Substack that you can look at, and it's phenomenal. All these different types of companies and corporations that they hide themselves behind. There's not that many food corporations in the United States. We had the last major consolidation. Global consolidation was 2017 and 2018. And I think in one of my articles, I said people are going to be asking what the F happened in 2017. And they're going to
Mm,
start looking back now. And I guarantee you, you look into the consolidation that happened in the food industry, in the seed industry, in the chemical industry, all at that same time. That was the final signing of the agreement saying we're going for this one world food group, and that's where we are, and that's what's unfolding right now. I call it a global food industrial shift, and people don't understand what that means. It's an industrial shift from the ground up. They're
mm.
going to change the food industry, and they're going to take away the power of the land, and they're going to take away the power of the farmer. The land that they do seize, well, they will turn into ESG models, just like what's going on with Bill Gates in the United States. 260 something thousand acres of farmland now. He's going to ESG
Wow.
every bit of that land, and people don't understand. Plus, he's got water rights. There's a lot of things that are coming down the pipe that people do not get, and I'm not a doomer, but this is happening. And the scale of it in the United States, it depends on us. It's not up to
Hmm.
them. They don't have control unless we give it to them. And people say, well, I can't do anything. Well, you know what? You can. You can do exactly what you did, John. You can go out there and you can source your food in a different way, and you can be intentional about it, and you don't have to be that person that just is complacent and yearns for convenience when it comes to food. Put some proof of work into it, establish some relationships to where you can feel empowered. And once you do that, you're creating a new consumer demand. And if we can, as Bitcoiners, this is where it starts. Bitcoiners are the one that always says we're going to change the world, and everything. And Bitcoin, just number don't go up. That's not how this works here. We've got to utilize the ethos. We've got to utilize the mind space. We've got to utilize the collaboration and the power behind the decentralized monetary asset that it is. And if we can start putting all of those together, then we can be intentional about our consumption models, and we can change our lifestyles in a way that we feel good about it. It's not a hard change. It's like you yearn to do it now, just like looking in the freezer, and that's what we've done within the beef initiative. We've sold over six figures through the beef initiative now of beef, and you can buy it in
Mm.
beef in Bitcoin. And I'm never going to say what we've done with Bitcoin or fiat. That's our business, but we've got the proof of work. We got people buying beef with Bitcoin, and it's a value for value exchange that they don't mind, because what you're doing, you're not telling the rancher that they have to go buy Bitcoin. You're actually letting the rancher earn the Bitcoin, and you're trading it in a value for value exchange that you're verifying, and then you're trusting. Everything's all
Mm.
the same as the ethos of Bitcoin.
Yeah, we're breaking that monopoly. It felt really good to send, I sent Bitcoin over Lightning
Hmm.
to on the Beef Initiative website,
Yeah,
and um, it's breaking that monopoly over centralization. It's trending towards a monopoly at the global level for the food supply, and the question is, are we going to hodl and let them continue to do that, or are we going to let farmers and ranchers start earning Bitcoin
there you go.
and break that chain?
Yeah. I mean, where else would you start except for your nutrition of your family and yourself? I have no problem trading Bitcoin for beef or good produce. I'll do that the rest of my life. And of
Mm-hmm.
course I hodl, man. I DC. That's all. I hodl, That's all I do, man. That's
Yeah.
all I've ever done. I don't have to worry about all this crap because I DCA in, man. I get it, I custodial it and get it in my wallet. And then, but I do keep about $1,000 on a Bitcoin wallet where I can purchase any type of beef that I want. And I want that to become the norm for everybody because if I spend that Bitcoin, well, I got to buy more Bitcoin now, but I'm going to trade it over here in this, peer to peer exchange transaction that our technology stack. I want to give a big shout out with to IBEX. We're now we're good partners with IBEX. If you're
Nice.
using the Beef Initiative, you're using IBEX. If you're
Oh.
using the Beef Initiative, you're using Oshi. All these technologies that have now come together within the Beef Initiative with IBEX, with Oshi, we're all working together now. It is a collaboration that now is the technology stack that anybody can go out there. And guess what? We're going to be taking it to these ranchers that want to do the same. If they don't sell beef through the Beef Initiative, we're going to give them that technology stack where, guess what? We're going to onboard you in 15 minutes and you're going to be able to do a peer to peer exchange for your beef now. And we're going to give you the voice because you can put your name in the Beef Initiative. You can have your information in there. If you don't want to any more than that, then that's up to you. We want to give you the voice and you the opportunity to trade and have that e-commerce capability to trade with Bitcoin. And we have our first rancher in the United States now. Well, I'll say that. I say that kind of confidently. But Cole Bolton with K&C Cattle, we started selling those beef boxes, back in January. Well, guess what? He's already now a full coiner because he traded beef and Bitcoin. Go for it, man. I mean, that's how easy this is. And that's what you're doing for that value for value exchange. That's how we innovate. That's how we just don't sit on our hands and think that number go up and Bitcoin's going to save the world. We've got to use it as the tool that it is. And if we can do it in a percentage way, like I don't know how much Cole saves from every transaction, that's his business. He doesn't have to tell anybody. He doesn't have to, it could be 2.7%. It could be 10%. He could do an 80-20 split. That's up to him at that moment. If that transaction comes through, he knows he can save that Bitcoin or he can automatically convert it into fiat. So he's running his business. His business is growing. And now he's opened up a processing center. We have the full integration of money and of health and of beef. And it's all happened within 7 months.
So yeah, fix the money, fix the food.
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, it
he's
is.
Cole's using it obviously because he's seeing some sort of value, and I'm guessing part of it is savings over the
Mm-hmm.
credit debit. So
Yeah, I mean, you look at credit cards, and those guys have to, 2.7%. It's usually what they're having to pay to the credit card companies. If that's all the farmer, rancher, animal producer wants to do is to save 2.7%, leave that in Bitcoin, never have to give it to the credit card companies. That's enough right there incentive to go ahead and get onboarded and, get an orange pilled and everything. And then I always say we're getting orange pilled and then, the Bitcoiners are orange pilling the ranchers and the ranchers are ranch pilling the Bitcoiners. And so it's a value for value exchange of education, right? And so
yeah,
if we get them and say, hey, we know you're paying 2.7% on that credit card, let's show you something new. Let's show you how you can have this transaction that is instantaneous. It settles. It's a unit of account. Here we go. And once you start in everybody, it took me a while to fully understand how to talk to a rancher about Bitcoin. And I think this is one of the biggest questions I get. People ask me, how do you orange pill a rancher? I said, well, you don't talk about Bitcoin. You go up there and you shake their hand and you ask them, you say, would you educate me on what you do and how you do it? And why do you do it like this? And once you get them talking, well, the conversation starts. And then after they've educated you a little bit, you say, well, can I purchase some, protein from you or whatever it is that you're talking to them about? And then you don't talk about Bitcoin. You establish a relationship with them first. You build the trust and the respect. And then, you know what, you kind of understand that, they talk and they think in a decentralized way. Well, you have several conversations with this farmer, rancher, animal producer. You know where the conversation always ends up? Ends up in Bitcoin. You don't lead with Bitcoin, man. You lead with what they do. You let them be the educators, because most people, most ranchers, most animal producers, producers of agriculture, they're educators, especially if they're doing a regenerative model protocol. You let them educate you first, and then they're going to go, man, this person has got some, focus. They have some intentional awareness, and they're not trying to be a salesman. What they're trying to do is they're allowing me to educate them on my passion in life. Once you've done that, they're going to go, okay, well, tell me a little bit about this Bitcoin. I don't understand it, because they don't watch TV all the time. They're out there being
Mm-hmm.
animal producers. They don't watch Netflix. They're working. They don't understand technology stacks. They don't understand e-commerce, and it's not their fault. They don't have time for it. So we have to understand who we're talking to. We have to understand perspectives and perceptions. Once you understand that as a Bitcoiner, you're going to be the best educator on orange pilling a rancher that you could ever be. And, in the past, we haven't had that technology stack, but now that we do have it, I'm going to be moving in Colorado. We'll be, IBEX is going to be there. Of course, Oshi's always around, but what we're going to do, you come to that conference, you're transacting in Bitcoin, and we're going to show them, everybody that comes to that conference, you want a beer or whatever, well, you don't have to buy it, but you're going to tip, and you're going to tip in Bitcoin. And then
Mm.
IBEX, I had a meeting with them today. They're going to give like the first 25 people that get to the conference $10 worth of sats, to where you're going to download the wallet, you're going to get onboarded to IBEX, and then you're going to go get whatever you're going to eat or drink or whatever it is that we have set up to where you can transact in, and you're going to use your Bitcoin wallet, and you're going to transact over the Lightning Network with IBEX and even Oshi if you want to. So it's all set up and it's streamlined now. And like you said, I mean, we're going to start building nodes. I'm testing out voltage right now. We've got node building going on. We've got this onboarding that happens real quick. We've got the Lightning Network. It's happening. We have proof of work.
Amazing. Yeah, hopefully the exchange rate stays the same, where they get like around 50,000 sats for $10, and then hopefully it goes up and they realize, oh, that 10 just turned into 15 or 20, and
This dip, man, this dip has been the best thing that could ever happen. I'm loving it, because you want to talk about talking to a rancher right now, thinking at 59,000 down to 20,000, and letting them know, you, my friend, have a really good chance of doing very well with the education that we're giving you now, the onboarding that you can get, that's a streamline pretty much. You can really leverage. You now have that store value that your grandfather knew about but didn't have. But now you want to talk about, using Bitcoin like your grandfather used land, or use it as a rancher, use the cow back in the beginning days of the Texas cattle drives. Well, guess what? We got a new store of value, and it's called Bitcoin. And they start understanding that. And that's what I always do. I compare, Bitcoin to a store of value, like we've let
yep,
how Sailor always says, 2 blocks in Manhattan way back when, you know they kept those 2 blocks, and they just built on top of it, built on top of it, built on top of it. These ranchers think the same way, and if you can compare, and paint those visuals, they can see that now, they do have a store of value. They just have to educate, and they're willing to get educated.
yeah, yeah. It's funny, right? I mean, you again back to the global piece of it. I was interviewing a Bitcoiner last fall for an earlier session of the show, and he comes from Ethiopia. And so I asked him, because he was recently in Ethiopia. I said, "Hey, what do they use as a store of value if their money is just depreciating at such a rapid rate?" And he's like, "Well, what they've always used, and it comes down to animals
Mm-hmm.
and land and things like salt, and that sort of thing, which is very familiar to ranchers and farmers and the like when they think about their land and their animals.
50 people a week. I was working with a couple of clinics, and I really went in. I was doing my research, and I went and looked at the protocols for diabetes and getting people dietitians and what they were recommending. And I was like, man, this is way off base. And I'm sure it's the same, like you're saying, what she had to battle. It's fascinating. And now that I have a lot of doctors that are coming into the beef initiative, and they're like, you're on to something. We can't, I've got a lot of doctors that don't want to dox themselves. And I asked, like Philip Ovadia, actually, he's a Bitcoiner. And he said, I asked him when I said, how much nutrition did you learn as a doctor, as a heart surgeon? About 45 minutes. That's it. We don't understand the lack of education that these doctors really do not have. They don't have it. And we
Yeah.
look at them as the authority, and they're not. They're just technicians. And now they basically become technicians of the pharmaceutical industry. They have 15 minutes, and that's it. And then they got to turn it and then burn it. And once again, insert the best. You look at the oxycodone epidemic that came. They were incentivized left and right, man. And it was up front. Even if a doctor was intentional about their understanding of oxycodone, they were told, man, this is not an addictive thing. This is, you're doing the right thing. You're treating chronic pain, and you're making their lives better. And not
Mm.
mass amount of true deception that is behind our food, the pharmacy, the dietitians, what they, you look at your wife. I mean, she's formerly trained as a dietitian. She don't have the tools. She doesn't, and most of these people don't. They don't want to admit it, because that's what they do. That's what they do.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, our family eats really well because she can apply everything she does know
Hmm.
about down to the chemical level. Like she
Right.
knows what to put, but the hospitals aren't cooking that kind of meal
Yeah.
for someone who's, recovering from a bone marrow transplant, right?
Hmm.
It's just like they need four insurers because that'll give them the calories and all the enriched stuff that that insurer has that they'll be able to accept. I mean, it's not like make them a smoothie with some this and this. It's like give them
Right.
an insurer.
It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating because whenever I got busted up, I was in the hospital for about 3 or 4 days at one point in time, and the options that they give you is laughable. And
Mm.
they load up, let's load you up on some sugar and some highly processed crap, and it'd be like cottage cheese and jello, and just all this really shitty food, and
Oh,
you're like, wow. And all these juices that just have no, it's just sugar. It's just pure sugar.
yeah,
And you look at the diabetes in this country. Every person on insulin, that's a $900 a month. That's basically the cost average of treating somebody on that is a diabetic. Well, they're not always. It's a subsidized product. The United States government's going to pay for whatever, and so
right.
that person's going to get their insulin. And
Yep.
so why would they change the model, man? Keep them on insulin, man. You know, it's just we live in a reactive dietitian, medical, everything world is so reactive that is that hamster wheel of keeping you just alive, keeping you consuming, keeping you trapped. And it's the same. Same with money, same with food, same with medicine. It's all the same thing.
Yeah, yeah. The debasement of the money keeps you trapped in debt cycles, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it actually incentivizes you to take on debt because it
100%.
supposedly makes things cheaper, like long term.
Right.
But they become cheaper because the money is worth less. You
Yep.
can't, you know.
Yeah. And that's how I explain it to people. I said, okay, all right, what is poverty to me? Well, no, what poverty is nutritional starvation, and what is
Mm.
nutritional starvation is poverty. They're the same thing because you can't if you're impoverished, you have a lack of nutrition to your body and your mind. Okay, you can't separate the two. It's the same thing. So what I see across the United States right now, and you're talking about the debt economy that we live in, especially after 1971, especially in the 80s, that you had really a full decade to create that debt economy and move forward. You had basically farmers lose their land in the 80s, and you had basically savings and loan industry debacle. You had all
Mm-hmm.
this debt cycle, new creation of debt that had to falter first. And that's what we're doing right now. We're stacking a new layer of poverty on the existing layer of poverty that's already there.
Mm-hmm.
And by saying that, you have to keep on stacking that debt cycle on top of a debt cycle. And what they're trying to do is they're trying to take it to the ground and recreate it to where once they've recreated this debt cycle, this monetary reset, that they have as much power over you as they have. And that's what's going on. That is the modern day enslavement that they're trying to accomplish. And, they did it with locking people up. They do it with monetary access now. If you eat, cow is a carbon hazard, and their plans are to basically track that consumption model. Those people that eat those, that eat the cow. Well, sorry, you're going to get some bad credit points on that. That's the
Mm-hmm.
ESG model. That's what they're doing. That's why they're trying to digitize the cow, saying, well, you're going to be able to eat this cow because we know exactly where it came from, and the soil, the grass, and all that. And they're, whoa, like, this is a wonderful cow. It's not their intention. Their intention is to digitize it in a way to where they know that you're consuming something that they are going to basically hold against you.
Yeah.
And then, digitizing food is a very dangerous thing.
Because then they have a CBDC, that you're using that limits your, you get $10 worth of beef this month.
Yep.
Oh, but next month that $10 isn't going to get you as much beef
Yeah.
as last month.
Yeah, equity, incentives, all that kind of bullshit is in your consumption model, to where you're pay for success. You hear about things like that. Predictive analysis of your consumption model will be controlled by them with the ESG model, to where, okay, you have this. Let's look at this at the housing market crash and how they basically created all the hedge funds, right? Low risk, high risk, medium risk, and everything that they started putting together. Well, let's
Mm-hmm.
do that with food consumption, and how they can use food consumption to put you in a type of human capital bond market, then create hedge funds around your consumption model, saying these people always eat at freaking McDonald's and Walmart. That's the only way they eat. So we know exactly what hedge fund they're going into. Well, guess what? They're on the CBDC, they're on the UBI. We're giving you these people. We know exactly that they're going to die at something, diabetes, heart disease, obesity, or something. Well, you got them, and they're going to consume your food. So there's your hedge fund, and
Mm-hmm.
there's yours. Well, you got these other people. Well, they're going to be lower risk, and you're going to have the medium risk. You're going to have the high risk people. It's the same thing with the housing market, with the credit scores. They're going to do it with food consumption, and give you cut off your market access, because you're going to have that CBDC, you're going to have that UBI model to where you don't have a say so. And we're kind of already there with all the food deserts that have been created across the United States and rural America and urban America. You can't find good food. I just did this tour, and I couldn't find good food in small towns. I mean, it's
Mm-hmm.
ridiculous. And you go into a restaurant. I was up in North Dakota last year, and we're in a little community. I won't say the community, but they had one restaurant. Every bit of that restaurant was fried, and every bit of it was frozen, and that was the restaurant. And they had a convenience store that fried, made pizza, had the fried chicken, and that was what their people eat every day. That was it. And I said the other day on Twitter, I said the supermarket has become the convenience store, and the convenience store has become the supermarket, and the supermarket has become the convenience store. And
Mm-hmm.
it truly has. And in that same town in North Dakota, you go to the grocery store, it's worthless. Green bell peppers, $2.50. And this is in farming communities. And you're like, what is going on here? They ship their food in from 200 miles away, when they used to be a powerful small community that grew their own food, sourced their own food, had decentralized access to food. That's how far it's changed. And they're in the middle of a food desert, right around thousands upon thousands of acres of agriculture. And you know what they're growing out there in North Dakota? They used to grow a lot of 80 to 90% of their crops were wheat, even in the monocropping days in which we came from the 70s. Well, now it's 50% freaking wheat and 50% ragweed, which is canola. Not
Mm-hmm.
ragweed, rapeseed. I'm sorry, rapeseed. So, and whenever your system is so commoditized and subsidized to where a farmer is going to say, well, we used to grow wheat, but I'm going to do the rapeseed now. Well, it makes more money. I can
Yeah.
survive. And, I've got the USDA insurance policy. So I'm covered this year. And here we go, that 12-month cycle, just like the dietitians have to go through diets across America. Yeah, it's all the same thing. It follows that devalued money and
Mm.
that debt economy we created.
Yeah. And so 1971, going back to the beginning, maybe to kind of land the plane, it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like 1970s was the decade of monocropping. Is that really what's kicked
That's
off this?
that's what kicked off. Yeah, that's when that big transition, and it monocropped because they knew they had all these chemicals, these herbicides, pesticides, and everything else that they could use to kill the insects, to make the corn grow higher, get better yields. And once they were able to do that transition, and farm aid in the 80s, that was the devastation of the 80s that actually basically was engineered during the 70s. And if I was a child
Mm.
of the 70s, so you look what happened in the 70s, we had gas shortages. We had
Yeah.
everybody was poor. We had, food changed. We didn't have this convenience model around food until the 70s. That's when you had, new TV dinners. You had microwaves. You had sizzling, it was the new bacon. You started having all these experiments with food, and it's based around
Uh,
convenience and devaluing your nutrition, devaluing your produce, devaluing your protein. And then the 80s was the after effect. And then once we got through the 80s, you had the major asset reallocation of land that a lot of farmers had to auction off their land, their equipment, and they lost their farms. My grandfather was older. He was in his 90s at that time. Well, he got rid of the land because he couldn't do anything with it. It was
mhm,
useless to him anymore, and he had to
mm.
sell it. And he sold it to basically, a sharecropper, or whether, somebody plant the seeds and use the chemicals that Monsanto told him that he had to use. And so that was a 20-year cycle from, going into the monocropping with Eric Butts saying you're going to go fence to fence, into the late 80s to where you had, everything, the land was reallocated, the type of farming was reallocated, the money was reallocated. And that's what we're about to go through again. I think it's going to be, they're trying to make it about 10 times worse now. So, and that's what you're
Because
seeing in
land,
the Netherlands.
yeah, land is becoming. They're trying to buy it on the cheap, aren't they?
Yeah.
The like,
Yeah. 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 Well, they're, they talk about, you talk about the people that really know what's going on the ground in the Netherlands. They're basically, they're taking land that's been owned by these families, this ancestral land for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and they're saying you're not going to own this land anymore. And that's why you're seeing this dramatic outreach right now. And you've got, farmers that are committing suicide. You're having, this is not going to end well. And even if it does end in the farmers in favor on this small scale, which is, it's not a small scale, but compared to the United States land and what their land mass is over there is not that, you can't compare it. We have so much more land mass. But even if
right.
there's a good outcome, guess what? This global food industrial shift is moving forward. They can't
Mm,
stop it. The contracts are signed, governments are obligated. They have to shut down and they have to destroy the food system before they
mm.
rebuild it in the way they want to.
Wow.
It's a 10-year
Okay.
plan. It's a 10-year plan. We're in 2022, so get ready.
Yeah. But you're not a doomer, so the
Nope.
the hope is decentralized. Create these nodes.
Mm-hmm.
Each rancher being a node,
Yep.
Bitcoin being the money.
Yeah.
Um, how
Oh,
how
it's
can we how can we join it?
well, what look at find out where you're living, right? Let's find out where we're living. Everybody individual, everybody's moving. A lot of a lot of Bitcoiners are moving to different states. They're finding their home. They're really reaching out. Let's get back to hyper localization. Let's get back to the mindset of community. What we have to do is we have to act locally, but we're going to broadcast globally.
Mm,
Rod with Nash Bitcoiners, him and Matt and Mills, the founders of Bitcoin Park there, Rod uses that statement all the time. And we're going to act locally, to take care of our community, but we're going to broadcast globally. So what do you do if you want to be part of the beef initiative? Go find somebody that'll basically, work with you and educate you first, and then go do what you've done. Well, you did it through the beef initiative because that's your market access right now. If you
Hmm.
can't, if you're in a big city and you can't, well, come to the beef initiative and start sourcing your protein. It's cheaper than the grocery store and it's 10 times better for you. And I'm not shilling this, man. This is a solution. This is
Hmm.
something. We're not making bunches of money off these boxes. We make very little money right now. Ranchers aren't making a lot of money off the product. What we're doing is building pillars of strength for people that want to come along. So joining your community, finding out what your community is, and going out there and shaking some hands first. Change your lifestyle. On Saturdays, don't watch freaking Netflix. Get out and take a road trip. Find out where you are. Don't rely on Google to do your searches. Use a different type of searching and do your own research and analysis. Do cross reference stuff. Go to a website like eatwild.com. It's a good website. It talks to farmers markets. You can find somebody through that website because I've scraped the internet 3 or 4 times. I could have a database, but I'm not going to do that. What we're going to do is we're going to grow it one rancher and animal producer at a time, and they're going to be kind of vetted by themselves because they're willing to stand on their protocol, or they're going to be vetted by a Bitcoiner or a consumer that's come, into the beef initiative and saying, "Hey, I want you to meet my rancher, and this is how you meet them." And that's starting to happen. And so, what you need to do is really, create the new consumer demand, but that starts with your mindset. And then, if you are trapped in Boston or LA or New York or whatever it is, and, we're delivering, nationwide right now, 48 states. I mean, we're delivering in different ways. One thing that's been tough is shipping because diesel prices, gas prices, distance, but we've got two different ways that we're shipping now. We're doing 48-hour air from when the time it ships. And then we're also offering 1 to 3 day delivery, and we're packing in dry ice now. So we've got a good protocol. We've got a good path forward. We're feeding everybody that wants to come through the beef initiative. And then beyond that, we got a headquarters in Nashville now at Bitcoin Park with the Nash Bitcoiners. We've got a headquarters in Colorado, got, multiple headquarters in Texas. Whenever Cole opens up his processing plant down there in Luling, I'm going to establish the basically the world headquarters down in that part of Texas outside of Austin. So we're going to build these nodes. Colorado's a node. Tennessee's a node. Texas is a node. We got 2 nodes in Texas. We start doing that as Bitcoiners, and you start looking at the map. Look at the map, see where you live, see what's around you. Start looking at demographics, start looking at geography again, start looking at land management. Start seeing Jason Rick of Rick Ranches that we're having a conference in Colorado in 2 weeks. He owns 400 acres of land, but he stewards 4,000 acres of land. If you can't afford hundreds of acres of land, go find out how you can steward some land. Go find out if you've got that desire. Find out. Come to the conference. These conferences are educational, man. We're not making any money. We're breaking even on these conferences. You get a 3 day conference for around $300, and you're getting fed the whole time, and you've got 10 people educating you for 2.5 days. That is value for value exchange right there. Educate, educate, educate. Go out there and talk to these farmer markets, wherever you can find your producers. Go out there. Don't allow your life to be led through these screens anymore. Go out there being intentional with your behavior. And it is, it's a lifestyle. I tell everybody it's an international lifestyle. Everybody else just don't, they haven't figured it out yet. Just kind of like Bitcoin is, this
Yeah.
is how we do this. This is how, we do it one rancher at a time. We would do it one Bitcoiner at a time. We do it one child at a time that's going to have a better chance and a better consumption model and better market access of education and of protein and good, clean food.
I love it. Yeah, because and then learn how to grow your own food, right, on whatever
Sure.
land you have, and then
Yeah. I mean,
supplement with your.
yeah, how many Bitcoiners do we have out there where, I mean, they're biologists. I mean, they know the damn soil. You want to
Yeah.
know how to grow a garden? Spend one day on Bitcoin Twitter and you're going to figure it out. It's amazing the type of, I mean, I'm serious. I mean, the people out
Yeah.
there, none your business, she. I mean, you got Elsie, you got all these guys that are doing it and they know what the hell they're doing, man. And then you got people like me bringing in the beef intelligence. We've got it. Use it, utilize it, leverage it. think like, think about food as we do about money. Think it with a Bitcoin mind, and you find your path. We've got people out there right now. I've met so many people in the last couple months, especially on this trip, where they've gone out and bought land. They're doing it right now. We've
Wow.
got Scott. He has Sacred Farms out there in Colorado. He's going to be speaking at the conference. He's first generational, man. He was a city boy. He did everything. He taught himself
Wow.
regenerative farming and ranching. He's got a small family now, and he's doing it. You got Ryan Leakman up in Wyoming. He came from Canada. Now he's drilling right now, man. He's going to get into energy. He's getting into regenerative. He's a hunter. He's got a family. You want to talk about living the dream? He's doing it, and he's not sitting on waiting for Bitcoin to go up. He's
No.
actually he's putting in the proof of work. You got to find out what your proof of work needs to be, and don't be
Hmm.
afraid to just step on out there. None of this was planned for me. Before COVID hit, man, I was going back to Thailand to ride a motorcycle. I'm going to do it now since I've met Captain Sid. He's just wrapping up his big old Harley trip across the United States. So we're in talks. We're going to go back over to Thailand, ride a motorcycle, build a motorcycle in Thailand, and then we're going to go do the beef initiative over in Thailand, because there's communities out there that are doing it exactly like we're doing it here in Texas and Tennessee and Colorado and everywhere else that we're about to expand out to.
Yep.
This is happening. People are jumping on board, and you don't have to have permission, and just you got to go shake some hands, and you got to be intentional about what you're going to consume, and that's the
Yep.
best thing you can do. It unfolds for you as the individual.
That's fantastic. Well, hey, yeah, you've got the conference coming up, so I want you to be able to plug away at the conference and where people can find you and Beef Initiative.
Sure.
Slim.
Beefinitiative.com. It's got most of everything, access to the podcast, which is Texas Slim's Vision. We're announcing in Colorado, we're going to have Texas Slim's Media. We're going to do audio docu-series. We're going to do the podcast, of course. We're going to bring other people in under the umbrella of the media company. So that's moving forward. Go to beefinitiative.com and you can go and look at the tickets for the Colorado conference. That's July 22nd through 24th. If you make it to Colorado, man, it's a great destination spot for a vacation, whatever. It's worth the money. Like I said, we're not making a bunch of money off of these things. And the education that you leave with is phenomenal. Twitter, of course, I'm at Modern T Man. You do a search on Texas Slim now, you're going to find me and Twitter and everything else. But YouTube channel is not very good. I'm shadow banned on YouTube, but there's some good videos out there. Go to the Beef Initiative on YouTube. And then one thing, if you don't understand what I'm talking about every day, all the time, go to texasslim.substack.com. That's a book there almost already that you can read, and you can get up to speed on food intelligence, what's going on. You can reflect and see. I was talking about what's happening right now last year, and now people are starting to see it play out. And there's a sequence of events that you can see. You can see where we've come from. You can see the source of the seed of the issues, source of the seed of the solution. It's all there. But we're going to have a conference in Georgia too in September, and we're going to have some really good speakers. We're going to start recording audio, video. We're going to make these things into entertainment, education. We're going to bring it all, and we're all doing it with volunteers. Everybody that works in the Beef Initiative is a volunteer. We're doing this with a value for value mindset. We're open source, we're crowdsourced. Nobody's making money yet on the Beef Initiative. Probably will happen in the long run. That's not people's intentions right now. We're not LARPing into this. We're not doing mass marketing. This is not what this is about. We're creating a movement that everybody can be a part of, and we want to open it up to everybody that wants to participate. And we want people to come with truth and honesty and intentionality. And if you can do that, man, we can all do this together.
Love it. Love it. Well, Slim, man, thanks for fighting through our technical difficulties on this one.
Man,
And
they hear us talking and they shut us down, don't they?
yeah, yeah,
I've been on some podcasts and I'll say something and it just goes totally dead. Just boom, it's just gone. And so you just never know, man. But anyways, yeah, we made it through it. So here we are. But I
they're making
appreciate.
us work for it, but it's worth it.
Oh
So
yeah, oh
thanks,
yeah.
thanks for your time.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you and everything, and thanks for participating in the purchasing of the beef box. Next time you need to upgrade, you're gonna have to get that Texas Slim's top end beef box. I'll shield my own box.
Yep, yep. My wife and I are in the midst of a pretty significant move. So you talked about that, and so
Right.
we're waiting until we're settled on the other end to make sure we
Well,
have an
yeah.
address to send it to.
Well, hopefully it's a good move, man. Congratulations.
What a fantastic session! Oh man, just a wealth. How can you not be pumped talking to Slim about the beef initiative and what is going to happen, especially when you compare it up against what is coming from the global food monopoly that really coalesced, as he mentioned, in 2017 or 2018, that move to really generate a true, if not monopoly, at least a small oligopoly of just a few key players. And there's a lot you can research based on that, but I think less research in that direction and more action, like Slim talks about in um, setting up, bringing on your local rancher to be a node in the beef initiative. This is a global thing. That was a cool part of the conversation, is that this ancient way of doing agriculture is actually the sustainable model. The new sustainability that comes from the destruction that fiat uh, has had over the past 50 years on agriculture and the way that we've done it for thousands of years has depleted the soil, it's drained it, it's killed it, and we're losing because of that as the average person. We are losing in our nutrition, we are losing in um, heritage and that rich culture that has come down up to us from down the generations, that down to us from up the generations, I should say, because it's not just in Texas. It came over from the Iberian Peninsula, so it's in Argentina, but also you've got uh, Central Europe, the Alps, Ukraine. You've got Japan and Korea. You've got Australia, and so this is a worldwide thing. Even in Africa, um, and to certain extents the subcontinent when it comes to milk and the like. And so you've got this incredible worldwide heritage. And so Slim is saying no more. He's like Gandalf in Fellowship of the Ring uh, to the Balrog. You shall not pass. And that's Slim and all of the ranchers he's working with here in the States. And this is becoming a global thing. It's starting small, but it's going global. And so that's a beautiful message. And it is so closely aligned with the ethos of Bitcoin. So I love it. And hey, if you like the show, please like. Uh, if you're on the legacy platforms, like and subscribe. If you're on Fountain, Breeze, follow. And Castomatic is another one. Podverse, follow. Set up your Lightning wallet and send Sats to the chunks of knowledge that brought you value, and that helps support this show, keep it going. Um, I am the host and producer at the moment. I've got Cal Casa down in Austin, who is on the graphics side, and my payments to him, he sends to bitcoinburr.org, which is his open source initiative um, for Bitcoin in Ethiopia. So there's another one. Cattle and farming and land in Ethiopia. Again, a worldwide movement here. And so, how can you not get fired up talking to Slim? Really appreciate it. This was super apropos because it was recorded just a couple days after the real big movement of the Boers, the Dutch farmers, and the things that they are experiencing are things that American ranchers have and are experiencing at the moment. The depletion of the land, the imminent loss because they're making losses, because they are growing crops that they just have not, that aren't natural to what they have done in the past, but are now the more profitable ones because the uh, complex that Slim was talking about at the very beginning are subsidizing that, and they're creating uh, malinvestment in a way, and that's affecting the farmer. And what ends up happening is that land that's depleted is useless. It gets sold off at the cheap, and it's used for something else. And that just is a cycle that a lot of farmers and ranchers are in across the world. And we want to break that cycle and turn it into a cycle of Bitcoin, good investment, leads to better uses of the land, better animals, better nutrition, more Bitcoin, and it's a virtuous cycle. It's a flywheel that's happening. So, man, what's going on over there? The Dutch are bringing the Germans in, and pretty soon we may get the French, potentially the Swiss. If Ukraine weren't being decimated right now, they would definitely be on it. I mean, they were the breadbasket of Europe for the longest time, and they've been destroyed once in World War II, slowly over the Soviet period, and destroyed again right now with all the conflict. But it's time to wake up. It's time to consume differently. It's time to use your Bitcoin. I know Bitstein says everyone's a scammer, and to a certain point that's true. They want your Bitcoin. But right now, using that Bitcoin and putting it into the types of products you want to consume to strengthen them over the long term is a great investment. And there's no better investment, for me, thinking about my family, my kids. Health is even more important than Bitcoin, my family and friends' health. And that starts with food. So in any case, fantastic session. Thanks for joining in. And in the meantime, stack, hodl, use some of that Bitcoin towards products and services that you believe in, so that they're strengthened. And we'll see you on the next go around here of Changing the Tide.